Gigi reading FoodWISE, still the section Whole While Growing. Strict application of FoodWISE guidelines rules out food from plants or animals that are genetically modified organisms, GMOs, or genetically engineered, GE. For one, we don't know what unintended effects might follow from altering the genes. Is animal consumption of GE corn and soy genetically modified to make it resistant to the herbicide glyphosate, as in the popular product Roundup, that is used to kill competing weeds in the fields, any different from that of non-GE corn and soy? This is, of course, the question. Apart from that uncertainty, there is increasing concern about contamination of nearby crops by airborne pollen from those GE plants. The effects of glyphosate remain vigorously contested. As I mentioned later in the notes, so here's a good place to remind listeners that I do have 250 or so notes in the back of the book, but they don't appear as citations in the text, which would have affected the readability of the text. Some researchers deliver a strong verdict on certain aspects of this. Using certain insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides to disrupt inherent biological cycles, or using irradiation or radiation for preservation puts food over the line, taking it from whole to contaminated or adulterated. But hold on, does that mean no chemicals? No, it just means we have to be careful about the ones we choose. We do know that the widespread use of antibiotics and growth hormones for livestock has led to the development of antibiotic-resistant pathogens, meaning it's getting harder all the time to kill harmful bacteria. It's no longer DDT residue threatening the reproduction of bald eagles. Thank you, environmental pioneer Rachel Carson, aided by Marjorie Spock. Now it seems to be amphibians around the world threatened by other endocrine system hormone disruptors and a host of other emerging crises. More directly related to our own food shopping decisions is the worrisome place of strawberries, spinach, nectarines, and apples at the top of the Environmental Working Group Shopper's Guide to the Dirty Dozen, list of fruits and vegetables contaminated with pesticides. Certainly washing apples in baking soda and water removes some chemicals, but other residue may penetrate the flesh or seed, and some produce is so difficult to wash that we are often tempted to skip this step altogether. So you can see that I'm introducing these ideas, which I talk about more in the book, in the context of WISE, whole, informed, sustainable systems and experience. What's your experience of a genetically organized, a genetically modified organism, 1 seed or 100 seeds? I mention at the end here, the Environmental Working Group Shopper's Guide to the Dirty Dozen. This is a list that environmentalists and environmental researchers refer to all the time. The Environmental Working Group Shopper's Guide to the Dirty Dozen. But I will be completely honest that I never had actually looked up the composition of the Environmental Working Group, or not on any serious level, until I was asked to write an article for Oxygen, and that article is going to come out later in the spring in that magazine. And the article was a lot about dirty and clean fruits and vegetables on this Environmental Working Group list. And I was shocked to find that the list consisted of luminaries who were media moguls, basically, and not necessarily environmental researchers. Also, I had a very hard time trying to figure out how the Environmental Working Group came up with the information that they did, how they used data that had been released by the USDA. So I refer you to that article, which should be coming out in a little while. And I mention Marjorie Spock, completely underrated, invisible woman in terms of the environmental movement. She is a celebrated eurythmist, practicing eurythmy as one of the anthroposophical initiatives. And she was key to providing data and prose that Rachel Carson eventually used herself. And there is a paper record of this. Dan McCanon of Yale talks about this work. The article I refer you to is about fishing and the fishing industry, and some speculation as to what's going to happen in terms of keeping fishers, processors, and remote villages in Alaska safe.